straight away with the first question, and that is a simple one for you. What is your job role?
My job role at the moment is it's quite unusual. I'm doing supply teaching and freelance educational writing. I was lucky enough, I was given by my college a year's sabbatical to go and do other things and try and do a little bit of research into things that I'm interested in, for like education technology, for instance, and the technology industry. So basically, I spend a couple of days a week in schools doing supply. I spend a couple of days a week working with various companies doing writing, and then I spend 1 day a week doing childcare. And it's childcare that's blatantly the hardest.
Okay, so you talked about your teaching somewhat. What's your teaching background?
I started about 12 years ago in secondary school. Well, before that, I was a TA for a couple of years whilst I was doing my university bit. Then I did my teacher training in Leeds, and then that was PGCE for secondary. Then I taught in secondary for about 3 years, and then tried to have a look for something new, and did supply and also adult training. I worked in PRUs, and they were called EBSDs at the time, which was Educational Behaviour and Social Disorder Units. And then around about 6 years ago, I started working in FE as an English teacher, a lecturer, they call it. I like lecturer, so it sounds a lot more grand. And I've been doing that ever since. I teach English, and I teach various other subjects such as work skills and employability. And very recently, I've started also teaching maths, because I think once they get you in, they kind of pinball you about, don't they? And you think, oh, you're in the office, you teach maths. Yeah, we'll go for that, you know. So I've been doing that, and yeah, and I'm just coming up to the end of this sabbatical this year, and I will be back teaching at my college in September.
Great stuff. And is that teaching the diverse range of subjects you just mentioned, or is it?
No, that is specifically teaching English GCSE and English functional skills, because of those subjects being so absolutely huge in FE at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so in all this time, in all those different roles you've talked about, who has been your biggest influence and why?
There's a couple of people. I've talked to other teachers about this, about who's influenced you, and my answer is often the same as theirs. It was a teacher at school. I went to Crofton School in Lewisham, which has now been knocked down, and it was, I think the modern parlance is challenging. I prefer rough, because I think it's a little bit more honest. It was a rough school, and there was a lot of disturbances, a lot of fighting, a fair bit of violence. But there was one teacher called Mr. Michaels, and he was my English teacher in Year 7, and he could control a class. Nobody made a move in his classes. He did it. His classroom management was superb, and it stood out a lot for me, because I realised then that something as basic as classroom management is kind of the starting point for learning. You can't learn anything if some kids throwing chairs, So yeah, Mr. Michaels, and he was very not frightening, but he would he would not hold back at you if you were doing something daft. And so I've taken my teaching style I can link back to him, and also my mum. My mum was an English teacher on the Isle of Dogs for around about 30 odd years, same school. And I used to go in as a kid. She used to take me into school for various reasons, and I used to watch her. And she was the same sort of model, in a fairly rough school. She had control of the classroom, and she did that because she was a drama teacher primarily. She had history in drama, so she put on a performance, and the performance was that of a drill sergeant most times. But yeah, so those are my two. So Mr. Michaels from Crofton School, I'm not sure what he's doing now. Hopefully he's been long retired, and also my mum, Sue Starkey.
Oh, lovely, lovely, very good. And other than your fantastic blogs and writing you do for various magazines, what piece of reading or research would you recommend that all teachers should access?
Now,
Why?
I was thinking about this. It's a terrible thing to admit. I am not a big reader of kind of traditional educational books. I know that I know that there's lots out there, and I started my teaching career, and my PGCE were given a reading list, and I was reading these books, and they had absolutely no relevance to what I was seeing in the classroom day to day, and that kind of put me off for the longest time. It's terrible, one bad experience kind of puts you off a whole kind of part of your professional development, but it did. And even now, I don't think I've read an educational book for a fairly long time. The last one I had a look at was Pedagogy Pressed by, is it Freer? Yeah. I had a read of that, and that read like a fever dream nightmare. So that also put me off a little bit. So what I tend to do now is I tend to read blogs. I tend to read teaching blogs because I find that the variety of voices on the net is much broader than perhaps a more traditional academic kind of reading pool. So I tend to read blogs, usually linked from Twitter. Twitter is my social media platform addiction of choice. So and that is a fantastic way of trying to it's a fantastic way of sharing information, and from that I look at tweets people have, and then I looked at blogs. I can't think off the top of my head a particular blog that I enjoy, because I do read a lot of them, and then from those blogs I do further reading and further research. And it's strange that the research that I usually do is probably not in the area of teaching. It's probably to do with psychology, or it's probably to do with technology. I've been doing a lot about gamification and researching about gamification at the moment as a way to try to hook students into learning. So, a bit of a disappointing answer is that I don't recommend a particular time. What I recommend is that if you're looking for a kind of smorgasbord of research, or a smorgasbord of writing from education, people involved in education, then social media is a fantastic way of pointing you to something that you might find relevant.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Okay, so of the many there are, you've got one teaching strategy you're going to share with teachers. What's it going to be and why? This is a strange one, because everyone works differently, and everyone kind of relies on their strengths and tries to disregard their weaknesses. I think behaviour is very important. I always think behaviour is very important. I think it's the building block of any good teaching, and I've been in situations where the behaviour hasn't been up to standard, and therefore there is no teaching that gets done. So behaviour is always my primary focus when it comes to trying to give some form of teaching. I mean, who am I to give teaching advice? I still have terrible lessons. Even now, after 12 years, I still have lessons where the kids run rings around me. But if I was going to say one thing, one teaching strategy is that you make them laugh. You make them laugh with you, and then they will do anything for you. And then you make them afraid. You make them afraid of the consequences of their misbehaviour, and then you mix those two up, so they're never really sure what they're going to get. So so there's always a smile, or there's a smile, but there's underneath the smiles and the laughter, there's steel. You've got to be able to make the students laugh, but you've also got to be able to make sure that they do what they're told, and you can't always do that with humour. You can't always do that by making kids laugh. So, but it helped. So make them laugh, make them afraid, and mix up the two. Okay. Any tips on making people laugh?
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it? Making people laugh. I found that being irreverent when it comes to teaching is something that students love. Teaching is often seen as a hallowed profession. It's often seen as something of a vocation.
I'm not 100% down with that way of thinking, to be honest. I've always seen it as a job, very much a very important job that means that, you know, that has wide consequences, but, you know, still a job. So I always found that being irreverent about what you're doing as you do it is something that students often pick up on. It's something that perhaps not taking what may be seemingly serious situations as seriously as perhaps they are often taken is one of the things that I often do. I tend to take the mick out of students quite a lot, only when they deserve it, and they deserve it quite a lot. But I do tend to mock students, which doesn't seem to be, and it's becoming rarer, that there's that kind of that kind of humorous pointing out of perhaps some of the strangely daft things that students do. You know, it seems that we sometimes sometimes we put students on a pedestal, and, you know, we tiptoe around them, and I don't think they appreciate it. I think they appreciate being involved in the joke. They appreciate being involved in a kind of dialogue that doesn't always mean that you're pushing, that doesn't always mean that it's about the, you know, the higher grade or the next standard, or if it is, then it's done in a fun way. It's done in a way that students can, you know, have a laugh, have a joke about it, that they can laugh at themselves. You know, it's not often that we try to get students to laugh at themselves. We often think of, you know, student experience and student voice as being, you know, should be taken deadly seriously. I think there is room in teaching to laugh at sometimes how strange and wonderful, but definitely strange, the learning experience is. And I don't think that's done enough, really. That's one of the ways that I try to get kids to laugh. About 50% of the time it falls flat on its face. You know, I've been in many a classroom where there's been tumbleweeds, but then I point out, you know, what's wrong with your sense of humour, kids? I'm hilarious. So yeah, so that's one of the, but that's only if you're naturally funny, or if you try. I think if you try to be funny, and you're not, then it's like watching a comedian bomb at an open mic session, isn't it? You know, you play to your strengths. If you're funny, be funny, but don't rely on being funny. Yeah, never. That's one of the problems that I've often had, is that I've relied on my strengths. You've got to work on everything. You've got to work on every single tool at your disposal. You've got to make sure that you've got a wide range of things, because, you know, it's sometimes what you rely on will not work. What you rely on is going to just come up against a brick wall, or come up against a student who is having a particularly bad day, or has gone through some sort of trauma in the morning that you haven't known about, or has just decided that he's going to, you know, grab the lad next to him and throw him against the door. You know, there's going to be times where you got to switch it up. You've got to rely on things that you're not really comfortable with relying on. You've got to be. Sometimes the comedian has to be the authoritarian. Sometimes the authoritarian has to be the clown. You know, and you've got to be able to make that switch and be comfortable in making that switch. So I say, be funny if you're funny. Don't rely on being funny, but just practice everything. You know, try everything and see what sticks.
Lovely. Thank you very much for your time, Tom. That's the
Thank
5
you.
questions.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah, really enjoyed that. Cheers, man.
Thank you.